Even if like one student benefits from this discussion, my objective is met. I said, okay, we are going to meet about biomedical engineering ways to deal with physiological stress, right? What I am going to do today is to deconstruct the effects of breathing paper that I had shared. Okay. Specifically, I'm going to deconstruct physiological sigh. And the point of deconstructing, okay, there are some very clear takeaways. Some of the takeaways are very surprising. Okay. That is point number one. Point number two, I don't want to stop just with deconstructing that and there is a takeaway actionable item, then we'll move on. But I want to probe you further. So I'm going to ask some very interesting questions and things that we can address as biomedical engineers. So that's the objective of this session. So thanks to the patience and encouragement that patience, love and encouragement that my students are giving me, right? So I have to reciprocate that love. Okay, that the way I'm going to do that is to certainly give you something worth your time. The way we are going to discuss, the perspectives in which we are going to look at it, okay, what we are going to discuss might already be there, but the way we are going to discuss it and the perspectives that we look at it and might not be out there. Okay, so and these are also very useful. Okay, that is something that I can tell you right now. There is a strong takeaway the near future as well as for the distant future. I started this 5 years back. I am not associated with any college or anything like that. I have an engineering PhD. Okay, so I'm a engineering doctor, and my PhD work is in applying engineering principles to study hematology, and then I also have additional postdoctoral training on cardiovascular mechanics. Okay, so typically one of these systems are studied, but I have had the opportunity to study both the systems. Okay, and also I'm generally interested about physiology, life, biology and all that. Okay, body, how it functions and all that. And to be practical, for some reason, even if you go take a look at my graduate SOP, standard statement of purpose, right? I'd written something, after graduation and all that. The reason I'm doing a PhD is that I want independence at the end of doing PhD, right? That is like, I don't want to be constrained and forced by forces that would bias my research or my thoughts or my actions in any way. Okay, for that reason I have decided to stay out of academia, but I am doing something about things that I feel interested about, something about biomedical engineering. Okay, I had 3 visions when I started with. These are the 3 visions that I started about 5 years back. Okay, I started this even sometime during COVID. Okay, so 2019. Where do I stand? So regarding the second point over here, nation where education with a good value system is not denied to any meritorious candidates because of societal or economic discrimination. So what I have managed to do is, take a book like Introduction to Biomedical Engineering by Indranill and Bronzino. Okay, it's as a biomedical engineer, I like that book a lot, and consider the amount of work that went on behind writing such a book. Okay, so the authors are Indranill and Bronzino, but if you look at individual chapters, these are typically contributed by experts from corresponding experts. Okay, so typically a team works in preparing a book like that. What, as far as undergraduate education in biomedical engineering is concerned, most of the students have started using the material that I have prepared as their reference or textbook. And then even some of the teachers, who want to teach biomedical engineering, they are also starting to use that. And the material is not necessarily a rehash or a repetition of standard books like, say, Prince and Links or Park and Lakes and biomaterials or medical imaging. Okay, but I have given it my own perspective and interpretation. Cut it short, single-handedly, I have created some study material like Introduction to Biomedical Engineering by Indranill and Bronzino. In fact, some of my teachers, professors told me possible to do that single-handedly. You cannot make a dent in education single-handedly, but looks like I have made some kind of progression over there. Okay, dent or whatever it is, I have made some progression. Now, looking at these visions, in fact, I was thinking when I started this, some of these visions were actually felt were impractical. But where I stand right now, seems like many of these visions are certainly manifestable. Okay. In fact, I told my professor, sir, education is an easy thing, but healthcare is a very hard thing that cannot be dealt with single-handedly, right? But looks like there is a possibility that that could also be done. And now that the second point is stabilized, work regarding education is stabilized, I am starting to address other visions, right? The hardest here seems to be where nation where the best of healthcare is available to all citizens, right? All humans. But next reachable seems to be nation which is the best destination for the most talented scholars, scientists, and investors from around the world. That is a point that I am addressing right now, and that is the reason for actually having this discussion. There is healthcare provided in hospitals. Typically, biomedical engineers, engineering students think they have a role to play there. But I keep saying, hey, hold on. There is also this healthcare obtained outside of hospitals. So now some of my students, yes, sir, there are also clinics, sir. There are also primary healthcare centers, sir. No, outside of hospital, I don't mean by that. Healthcare obtained outside of hospitals typically go by the name prevention. Okay. Say it that way, this is like, hey, all of you agree with that. Okay. So there is also healthcare outside of hospitals, outside of the diagnostic centers and all that. Incremental changes are possible. Appears like only incremental changes are possible with healthcare provided in hospitals. Medicine, things, protocols, all of that are set. Instruments, all of that are set. Companies are already there manufacturing it. Perhaps you could do indigenous manufacturing, bring down the cost, but typically these are incremental changes. But if you look at healthcare outside of hospitals, not only incremental changes, but reformative or revolutionary or out of the box, 10x changes are possible. Okay. So there is also this possibility, and that possibility is not a small subset. It has tremendous potential. Okay. In fact, so we are going to kind of look at things, stress and all that, how many students are visiting doctors, sir, I am stressed, and all that, right? So this needs to be typically dealt outside of the hospitals. Because we are going to talk about healthcare, and this now, the actual disclaimer I'm going to tell you is this. So typically, regarding healthcare, this disclaimer, this is not medical advice, right? You should, if you have medical problems, you should visit a physician, get appropriate medical advice, right? What are some things that differentiates a good doctor or an expert in some field or a professional in some field while doing a very dangerous thing? They have prior knowledge. They kind of possibly know all the complications that can occur and all that. And in fact, if you look at a good doctor, a surgeon, okay, the difference would be more evident. Passion, okay. No, passion. So passion gives you the license to deal with danger? I partly agree with that. Okay, that's partly there, but okay, that's a very interesting way to look at it. Knowing certain minute details, which is often overlooked. Fine, yeah, they have this prior knowledge of things that appears simple. All I did is to put that switch, right? That rocket blasted off, right? So knowing certain minute details, which is often overlooked. That's correct. But one of the important differences, plan B. Yeah, plan B is actually closer to the difference that I had in mind. Okay. So imagine a bicycle, right? With only one-sided handle. You can only turn left. How many of you would dare to ride that bicycle? Sir, I can let go of both the hands and cycle, sir. Right? So typically that's very dangerous, right? So if you don't have two handles, if you can only turn left or you can only turn right, in fact, if your cycle is constrained to turn only one side, I don't think it will be stable. Okay, it will be unstable and it will not run. Okay, the thing here is doctors, for example, prefer a drug with an antidote. If a drug has a certain effect, if it increases certain physiological parameter, they also know how to reverse that. Okay, if they go know, if they know how to go take a right turn, they also know how to take a left turn. They meant excessive right, they know how to make a correction for it. Okay, so doctors prefer a drug with an antidote. Something is going towards the danger area, they know how to pull it back, not only move towards danger area, right? Increase something, they also know to decrease something. Okay, so antidotes, reversing an effect of a drug is a very good example. And most of you, you're doing something, hey, I did this exercise, that's exercise typically rises something, but things go wrong, do you know how to get it back? That is missing, and until that is missing, certainly all the disclaimers that are put here applies to you. Okay, so I am a biomedical engineer, I know how to deal with the situation, right? As far as you don't know how to reverse something, negate what you have done, you should typically avoid it. Now, having said that, my real disclaimer is, so once the mind expands, there's no going back, right? Once you learn an idea, once you learn to see things in a certain perspective, there is no going back. Okay, it takes a long time to, if the perspective is not interesting, it takes a long time to, forget it and all that. But typically, once the mind expands, there is no going back. The discussion that I have here are intended to expand your mind. And do I know how to reverse that? Do I know how to contract that? I really don't know, but still, okay, I'm going to go ahead with this presentation. For everyone, brief structured respiration practices enhance mood and reduce physiological arousal, right? This is published in a decent journal, okay? And also this is made open access so that, these kinds of discussion is possible. And I suppose this is also, the authorship team is very, very good. I think Huberman here is he is a corresponding author. He is a very, very popular YouTuber, right? So this is a very good, authorship team, very decent journal. Just by reading that paper, what they have done, okay, as a biomedical engineering student at an undergraduate level, gives you a lot to think about. Okay, quickly, what they say is the highlights say daily 5-minute breath work and mindfulness meditation improve mood and reduce anxiety. Okay, so if you do it daily, 5 minutes of breath work and mindfulness meditation, right? Okay, that's improving mood and reducing anxiety. Breath work improves mood and physiological arousal more than mindfulness meditation. Okay, let's get into some of the details as we proceed along, but seems like breath work improves things better than meditation, right? Yeah, particular form of meditation. And then cyclic sighing is more effective at improving mood and reducing respiratory rate. Cyclic sighing, so we just spoke about bicycle, one-handed bicycle. So it's not sighing. Sighing, I suppose most of you know what sighing, this is, right? Sighing, most of you know, I suppose you know what this is. Cyclic sighing is not sighing while you are cycling. So this is like repeated sighing, right? Seems to have an interesting effect. So these are the highlights. And quickly, what have they done? They have taken, about 100 odd participants, okay, They have divided them into groups. They have prescribed or suggested each group do a specific practice daily for 5 minutes. First practice is physiological sighing. What they do is, here they are doing an inhale, and then you think you are done with the inhale, time do a little more inhale, right? And then do a very long exhale. This is what they are referring to as physiological sighing, right? Roughly, okay. I don't know if I have a audio system that is that good, but inhale, normal inhale, go an extra mile, and then elongated exhalation. Typically, inhalation is through the nose and exhalation is through the mouth. Then another group were doing box breathing, where they inhale, then they hold, then they exhale, and then they hold. Hold doesn't, they pause, right? Inhale, hold, no exhalation, no exhalation. Okay, I'm speaking, so there is a bit of exhalation, and then exhalation. Then I don't inhale as soon as the exhalation gets over, but I leave a pause, then I inhale. So this is box breathing. And then they do cyclic hyperventilation. Here what they do is, at least it's easier to compare physiological sighing with cyclic hyperventilation. Do longer inhales, shorter exhales, okay, 30 times, and then they hold for 50 seconds, okay. The exact details would be given in the paper material shared with the paper and all that, but okay, 3 types of breathing, and then mindfulness meditation, a particular form of meditation. Typically, mindfulness, be mindful about wherever your mind wanders. Whatever you're thinking, keep track of that. That is one form of mindfulness, but I suppose keep track of your breathing. That's a form of mindfulness prescribed here. What seems to have happened here is, in fact, the results seems to be schematically shown here. If you look at respiratory rate, physiological sighing seems to have resulted in a big change in respiratory rate. In fact, I think physiological sighing lowered the respiratory rate the most, improved the mood highest compared to the other practices suggested here. So there is 2 groups, mindfulness, there is a meditation group, then there is a breathing work group. So about roughly 100 patients, right? They lost to follow-up, so 3 patients are lost, but here in each group roughly 24, not roughly, okay, we have 24, 30, 21, 33 patients in these different groups. So this is the kind of amount of data they are gathering, and they are, okay, these 4 forms of breathing that we already saw. And then there are some baseline measurements as the participants enroll in the study. From day 0, they start doing the practice, right? They keep tracking them. Study ends by 29. They keep tracking them post-study till like day 31. So they have the baseline measures. They have post-study measures. Some of the things like, okay, what are the measurements that they are doing? Okay, some state anxiety, pause effect, negative effect, HRV, HR, or HR respiration sleep. Okay, we'll come to some of these parameters in a while. So measure this every day. See if they change before and after that study, not just that. See if it also changes during the study. Okay, this is what they have done. Let's cut to the chase. Strong, some interesting points about this paper. Daily practices were 5 minutes, but effects were seen outside of those 5-minute window. On an average, every day they calculate some of these parameters like breathing rate. There is an effect, right? Practice is for 5 minutes, but effect is for a longer term. That's something notable. Point number 2, right? So many of the things that I described here, right, it could be there in the appendix and things like that, right? of the article. So they were given video instructions, I suppose. So if you consider these as interventions, things to change course, right? These interventions can be done remotely. You don't need to go to a hospital to do this intervention. They can be done remotely. Some of this can also be monitored remotely. That's also something very notable about it. Okay, these are two very interesting details about the paper. So this is, at this stage, this is interesting, right? In one of the questions that I have for you is, see, as a biomedical engineer, right? This is a project that you could do. Your parameters of interest. Your parameters of interest, as in your sensible parameters of interest, some wearable device or something like that. Ethical, moral, consent, and all that. You meet all the guidelines, standards, and you get all the permissions and all that. Do this. See if there is a change, right? Something that is feasible. Most of you could do, right? So, in fact, a typical project, scientific work, published paper is this, and this is, most of you are capable of doing this. Something that to highlight. Okay, here we have one comment that is, I'm going to paraphrase the comment. Okay, so we can say that mindfulness is for being aware of what situations bring stress. Sighing is for actively working on reducing the stress. Okay. Oh, okay. So now, okay. So this is actually an interesting point. The way I read it, hey, here probably they seem to be downplaying mindfulness, but the point of mindfulness is something very different, right? You should be aware of your issue. First, you should be aware that you are stressed, or first you should be aware that you can do something about your stress. And only you can get proactive. So the point of mindfulness perhaps is something different. Pitching against a breathing work seems to downplay the effect of mindfulness, is the way I read that statement. Okay, fair comment. And then sighing, it seems like you can actively work on that sigh to reduce your stress. Okay, right? Yeah, so I don't think the paper tries to downplay mindfulness, and I don't think mindfulness should be downplayed, right? Fine. Good comment. Interesting comment at this stage. Okay. So now let's get into some of the details of this. So some of the parameters that tracked. Okay, while I say this, we have another comment. Just mimicking a breathing pattern like exercise, fast breathing for stress busters can even have potential for reducing ADHD. Okay, your thoughts. Okay, so yeah, one is certainly looks like one of the things that is very interesting about this is, as I said, 5-minute interventions, remote intervention seems to have potential for doing positive change, right? And our task right now is to get systematic, scientific, justifiable, sensible, and all that, right? Affordable, accessible. It's affordable, sir, but it doesn't work in a place where there is no internet. Doesn't work in a place where there is power cut, right? So our task is to make it affordable, accessible, right? And we can start with doing simple studies like this. Of course, we can start doing with practice breath works, but as biomedical engineers, these are some simple studies to consider. Yeah, breathing pattern seems to have potential to deal with interesting stressful scenarios. PTSD is quite often discussed about whenever this term stress shows up. Stress, sir, force per unit area. What is the stress? What is post-traumatic stress disorder? After an impact to the experimental sample, is there like additional traumatic stress, impact stress? The material has failed. No. This is like stress. I suppose all of us understand. Used in a different context, right? When physiology, when homeostasis is challenged. That's one way to, yeah, that's a working definition for stress. I'm saying it's challenged. What happens? Response to the challenge, body's response to the challenge. That's a very different question, right? Whether that adapts or maladapts, that's a very different question. We'll put that on hold. But a challenge to homeostasis. That's a very simple working definition for stress. And in fact, we'll find better working definitions for stress. In fact, what are some of the parameters they are looking at quantifying stress, right? Positive and negative affect schedule, PANAS, state trait anxiety inventory. So I suppose these two inventories or psychological inventory. So it's like a questionnaire. We did a poll at the beginning of this class, right? So there are about 20 questions. Can you rate that typically in a Likert scale or something like that? Hey, strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree, something like that. About 20 things like, hey, how did you feel? Good? Did you feel better? Did you feel anxious? Right? Did you sleep better? Things like that. So in fact, if you search PANAS, positive, negative affect schedule, you'll get that inventory. Even if you search STI, you'll get that inventory. So these are psychological and these are self-reported. Okay. These are one set of parameters that were tracked. Surveys or questionnaires or inventories. Fine. And they also put wearable devices to track sleep hours to try to see if it kind of increases quality, quantity, and regularity of sleep. They're trying to quantify that using sleep hours, sleep efficiency, sleep score. From what I read in the article, from my working memory, there wasn't any significant effect on sleep. Okay, statistically significant effect on sleep. In fact, even among, okay, there we have HRV, heart rate variability, resting heart rate, and respiratory rate. Okay, so and in fact, the most changes were observed regarding respiratory rate. Is that correct? Again, this is from my working memory, right? We can always go back and refer to that paper, but I suppose most changes, significant changes with respect to mindfulness and breathing was seen with respect to respiratory rate, right? Heart rate variability, I won't put you into this pain of asking what is this heart rate variability and all that. Heart rate 72 beats per minute, that's one way to look at it. But if you notice, the distance between RR doesn't exactly correspond to 72 beats per minute. On an average, it's 72 beats per minute. Sometimes the RR is slightly smaller. Sometimes the RR is slightly longer. Some of you are wondering, sir, what is this RR? I know RRR. What is this RR, right? Length of a heartbeat. Fair question, length of a heartbeat. So that length of a heartbeat varies from beat to beat. Almost there is a tug of war between systems in your body that tries to increase your heart rate and systems that try to decrease your heart rate. This variability is a proxy for that war, the tug of war between those two systems. In that sense, so there's a proxy for a war. Okay, tug of war. In that sense, it's quite an interesting parameter to track. Resting heart rate. At this stage, I need to ask you about, okay, resting heart rate and respiratory. Hey, the paper started with, let's see, brief structured respiration practices enhance mood and reduce physiological arousal. Okay, mood, they did some inventory. Psychological inventory. Okay, they did some questionnaires. Okay. Physiological arousal. Okay, sleep also somehow, you're stressed and all that, you're anxious, or you're like too much excited, you don't sleep, right, and all that, or you sleep a lot during certain days, right? Okay, sleep also kind of makes sense. But why? I explained heart rate variability with a simple analogy. It's a war, tug of war. Why did they look at this? So in fact, if you had to go design a study, what are some parameters that you could track? Typically, you're going to come here, right? HRV, what is the heart rate? Closely vitals, right? Heart rate, respiratory rate, and all that. And then HRV, typically, things like this. Okay, stress increases the work of our sympathetic nervous system. Yeah, sympathetic, parasympathetic balance is what I was referring to as tug of war, right? So effect of, when the sympathetic nervous system takes a upper hand, it puts you in this active mode, fight or flight response, right? Your heart rate increases and all that. So, and typically this fight mode, okay, fight or flight mode is seen as a anxious, for lack of better terms, okay, anxious, stressful, aroused states. So if your heart rate increases, sympathetic system, it sounds sympathetic, but it's not all that sympathetic, right? That is, it's quite aggressive, right? So that sympathetic system is active. So heart rate is a proxy for stress, for arousal, physiological arousal. Same thing, right? On the other side, hey, calm down, take a deep breath, calm down. Hey, what is a brief structured respiration, taking deep breath? I know, no, this is lot. Even my grandma has been training, right? So respiratory rate, notice when we say we calm down, first thing is we try to bring down the respiratory rate, and correlated with that is that the heart rate also comes down, and this is seen as a state of calmed, relaxed mode. Okay, preferably in a working range, in a nice range. Heart rate rises too much, right? A fight or flight response, right? Heart rate this side goes up, or this I will rest, deep rest, right? Homeostasis, things should be in moderation, not too high, not too low, right? Heart rate too low is also a problem, but when things lower, it's seen as calming down or relaxing. That's the reason, okay, they are looking at this. Great. And most effects are seen in respiratory rates. Okay, what kind of effects are seen? Some of you are wondering at this point, so I also have some visuals. 4 figures, mindful meditation, okay, change in RR, respiratory rate, okay. Okay, this average seems to be over here. And for the breathwork group data, average seems to be here. Squint your eyes and all that, you could kind of see the data is kind of boxes look almost same there. Okay, now this is like really pixelated and all that. We are hitting Nyquist limit, but the spread in this data points, these data points seems to be slightly higher. This slightly, right, strongly higher. Strongly higher is a very different, but slightly higher and all that doesn't hold water. That's why they seem to have a bar here with a star denoting. Do some statistics. These numbers, this group data is statistically speaking significantly different compared to this group, which is like this line is shorthand notation for that. Again, if you have to compare respiratory rate, yeah, cyclic sighing, in fact, the rates seems to have lowered the most. Yeah, the rates have lowered, right? You could kind of at least visually see that statistically significant difference. Okay, certainly in fact, cyclic sighing as far as respiratory rate is concerned stands out. And then if you have to look at heart rate variability, resting heart rate, not statistically significant, right? Appears this way, that way, no. Statistically speaking, no, there isn't good evidence for this. Some of the p-values were close to 0.05 and all that, less than 0.05, I suppose, for some of the conclusions I made here. So I'm not going to make pretend to be a statistician and make comments on p values and all that. Okay, so there is a statistical difference. That's it. What kind of difference? Okay, we can see this in this visual. This has been quantified in a systematic procedure. Okay, now let's get into the mechanics of this. Okay, so why these groups? One is they want to see the effects of meditation versus breathing. Meditation, particular form of meditation, mindful meditation, particular form of mindful meditation versus breathing. And the breathing groups differ in terms of deliberate rhythm change. For example, inhalation, exhalation, inhalation, exhalation, inhalation, exhalation, right? Normal breathing. I mean, not normal breathing. Typically, what we think of breathing, quite repetitive, right? Very boring. But this is like inhalation, exhalation, inhalation, and exhalation, inhalation, inhalation, exhalation, right? You're changing the rhythm. So one is there is a deliberate change in rhythm, and of course, notice physiological sighing idea is can you go that extra mile, or in sense like okay, you think inhalation is over, can you go a little extra mile? Plus, some of the things that I didn't talk about. Notice in physiological sighing, you are inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth. The equivalent resistance. What resistance? Hey, today only we did biofluid mechanics, right? Basic Hagen-Boysley and all that. Equivalent resistance for airflow in the nose. That's of very different resistance, typically higher resistance, compared to resistance through your mouth. Diameter changes, length changes, everything changes, right? So you could see. So you are doing resistance changes. Not only that, in fact, that's a zeroth order system. As a first order system, along with the lung, okay? Lung has a compliance and all that. The system has a compliance. You are doing actually impedance tuning. Okay. What is that? Hey, we'll have to wait until we discuss first order systems. But right now, okay, you're by using nose and mouth during inhalation, exhalation, respectively, you're changing the resistance of breathing. That's also being done. Okay. There is this deliberate hyperventilation. The way to look at this is they are trying to look at the difference between by changing inhalation exhalation ratio. Okay. Notice physiological sighing, inhalation is shorter, exhalation is longer, right? Inhalation is longer in hyperventilation, cyclic hyperventilation. Exhalation is shorter in hyperventilation. So they're trying to play around with inhalation exhalation ratios, try to see that difference, one thing. And again, inhalation, they're trying to create an asymmetry in inhalation exhalation, breathing through the nose and exhaling through the inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the mouth. They're also doing this resistance change or impedance tuning. So that's a reason, and some of these are fairly known. Physiological sighing is have been studied and has been known for some time. Box breathing is a technique used by, I think, typically by army and all that, and cyclic hyperventilation in sports and all that. This has been known and studied. Deliberate breathing exercises, stating that is one thing. What is going on behind the scenes in physiology, that's a very different thing. One is meditation versus conscious exercise. I don't want to use the term conscious exercise. Okay, I would rather use either a deliberate or voluntary exercise. Okay, I prefer deliberate. Okay, so meditation versus deliberate exercise. That is one thing, that difference that is being studied. And by deliberate breath control, some of the things they are trying to change, some of the things, in fact, that seem to have an effect, or rate of breathing. Okay, In fact, the whole thing starts with this thing, right? The default breathing we do, right? Very shallow. It's highly inefficient. At least for some time, can we do deeper breathing and improve its efficiency? And interestingly, can it have long-term effects, right? So they are changing the rate, right? By deliberately controlling their breath, they're deliberately controlling the rate of breathing. They're deliberately controlling inhalation, exhalation, duration, right? One is longer, shorter, physiological sighing, right? Other way around and hyperventilation. They also change the intensity of inhalation, exhalation. How? For example, cyclic sighing, inhale through the nose, different resistance, right? Exhale through the mouth, different resistance. So they also play around with the intensity of inhalation, exhalation. Now, it is one thing, the speed at which you are doing, and then to put a pause. Imagine music without silence. There is no music, right? Only music if you have silence, right? So, okay, they are introducing pauses. For example, in hyperventilation, there is a pause. Even in box breathing, there is a pause. They play around with the rhythm. In a way, so, okay, what is the difference? What am I referring to as rate and rhythm? In rhythm, notice it's not always inhalation, exhalation, right? IE, 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 right? IIE, IIE, IE, like inhalation, exhalation, right? Extended double inhalation. So they are also changing the rhythm of breathing. They did all these different groups. Reasons are getting better now. The behind the scenes, underlying changes in physiology are also starting to make sense, or like we are starting to see the differences, right? Let's focus on one thing, physiological sign. Okay. There is deliberate breath control. There is extended double inhalation. Often overlooked, there is also deliberate muscular control. And I am stating this because when breathing is given a very special place, again, words like consciousness, unconsciousness are kind of used in a improper way, and breathing kind of lies in the bridge and all that. Breathing often is given a very special place. For example, hey, digestion, right? Digestion fortunately happens involuntarily. This complex metabolic process, if I have to convert that dosa into like nutrition and waste products, I don't know how to do, right? But somehow our body does it. Happens involuntarily. Can we intervene and control digestion? We can control what goes in. Okay. Few other things. But we cannot control digestion. We cannot be deliberate about digesting the meal that we eat. It happens involuntarily, right? So let's contrast that with breathing. Whether we are deliberate or not, involuntary breathing is happening, right? We can also take active control over breathing. That is, we can also change the rate, rhythm, exhalation, inhalation, duration, intensity, and all that. We can play an active, voluntary, deliberate role in breathing. This is very special. This is very, different from other physiological processes. This is often quite, viewed upon perspective. But hold on. In fact, a typical example here, hey, what are some processes that can happen involuntary as well as voluntary? Let's try to think of some processes. Do you have any guesses? Hey, this physiological process can happen voluntary as well as involuntarily, right? Typical example is Let's think of a process that is thinking. And sometimes wanders here and there, right? Sometimes, of course, we have it in our control. We decide where it wanders, where we focus and where we concentrate. Thinking is an example where it happens involuntary without control. Also, it can happen with control. Are there any other examples? Digestion, voluntary digestion, right? Heart rate control, heart rate increase, decrease, voluntary increase, decrease of heart rate, right? I will focus, I will find that part of my nervous system, right? I will get control over that synesthesia and all that, right? I will control the heart rate. Extremely rare, right? Respiratory rate, yeah, I mean, so respiration we have, breathing we have this control. Notice muscular control, blinking, muscular control, yeah, blinking actually. Hey, there are other examples. Breathing seems to be not all that special, right? Blinking, right? Muscular control, walking, right? You can walk involuntarily. You are thinking about something else and then you are walking. Your body is walking. Then you can decide to walk the way you want to walk. If you are a fan of Monty Python, you can walk in, many interesting ways, right? So my important point here is, in the process of, or in the name of deliberate breath control, default deliberate breath control cannot happen without deliberate muscular control. Muscular control can also be deliberated, and these two are confounded. The only way you can deliberate breathing or control breathing deliberately is by, okay, you guys know this physiology. There are intercostal muscles. There is the diaphragm. You can use, you can do intercostal breathing. You can do diaphragmic breathing, right, and all that. So you can control that muscle, and that's a way we can control breathing, right? This is apparent. This is not so apparent. In fact, those who read the paper, how many of you thought there is also deliberate muscular control going on? But notice, by default, there is also deliberate muscular control happening, right? For those who are interested, okay, so diaphragm is a muscle that we control. Intercostal muscles are involved, right? Phrenic nerve controls kind of diaphragm. Vagus nerve also. Typically, we're trying to control breathing, respiration, and all that. Vagus nerve is involved. Okay, deliberately or not, directly, voluntarily or not, deliberately or not, it is involved. Vagus nerve is involved and all that. So, generalized takeaways. Breathing has an effect on your mood. Okay, highlight. Going on is, so you can do deliberate breath control by means of changing rate, inhalation, exhalation, duration, intensity ratios, by adding pauses and by changing the rhythm. And so if there are changes outside of that 5-minute practice window, it suggests there are changes in systems that control rate of breathing. Typically, this nervous system, changes in brain activity, okay? In fact, this autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic balance seems to change, right? And notice, in fact, some of the things that may not be explicitly mentioned in the paper, there is a part of your brain that controls rhythmic breathing. I, E, I, E, I, E. Inhalation, exhalation, inhalation, exhalation, right? The moment you do inhalation, exhalation, you are activating a very, very, very different part of your brain. So you're doing actually, while trying to do deliberate breath control. I mean, breath control. Okay, you did confoundingly. You did deliberate muscular control. Okay, diaphragm, intercostal muscle. You kind of touched the phrenic nerve, vagus nerve, and all that, right? You also touched how your brain is active. You are activating different regions in the brain because they are taking care of, example, the rhythm, right? Rhythm changes. Normal rhythm, inhalation, exhalation, one part of the brain. If you change that, I will go that extra mile, one additional, 3-hour exam window. I will prepare for 3.5 hours, right? I will build stamina like that, right? Meeting is scheduled for 1 hour. I will go for, anyways, interesting. We'll discuss for 1.5 hours, right? That extra mile seems to activate a very different part of your brain that is not that explicitly mentioned in the paper. Okay, one thing. But of course, if you read the references therein, it is there. There is this change in autonomic nervous system. A part of your nervous system is trying to increase the rate. A part of your nervous system is trying to decrease the rate. Sympathetic, parasympathetic systems, right? There is a change happening there, and typically referred to as excitability, ANS excitability. Sometimes this is also referred to as ANS tone, or terms like vagal tone are used. So I have read somewhere that if we fake a smile, we can trick our brain into thinking we are happy. So yeah, that's a very interesting comment. Okay, at this point, so I'll do deliberate smiling, sir. I will activate a different part of my brain, right? I will trick my brain into. I will activate a different part of my brain, and I'll trick into thinking that I am happy, right? In fact, that's a very, very, very interesting line of thought. Okay, so we'll get back to that. But at this point, did you ever think of putting that to use? Right. In fact, notice what I want to notice. That's a very interesting comment. As a biomedical engineer, you're also at this. You can get the opportunity to actually test it out. Not read somewhere else, but you have the opportunity to actually do it and let the world know what it is, right? Okay, but that's a very, very, very interesting comment, right? So deliberate breath control is a very, 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 breathing is a very, 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 very complicated process. I thought digestion is complicated. Breathing is also complicated. Everything, right? Anything is like involved. Things are confounded. There are changes happening in the brain. There is changes with the nervous system excitability, right? And then, or excitability or tone. Excitability, I suppose, has a simpler connotation, right? We have the sense of what excitation is. So I'm going to stop at that. I'm not going to bother you with the actual definition, but by controlling breathing, you are affecting the brain. You are also affecting muscular control. Do you all agree with this? In fact, the comment about smile kind of says that, hey, this is interesting. Yeah, can we start looking at things this way? So, in fact, these are some generalized general takeaways or general highlights they had in the paper, right? Like that. These are some generalized takeaway. By that, I am trying to mean in this paper they did 4 things: mindfulness, meditation, this, right? How about other things? What else can we do? Example, can we smile and change the status quo? What is the physiology of smiling, right? Are we happy when we smile? Can we trick our brain into being happy, right? So these are some interesting questions that I deliberately wanted to impinge on your mind. Okay, if we stopped here, okay, that's not the point of this meeting. I have scheduled this for 2.5 hours, right? So my plan is to at least get you thinking in very interesting ways. I'll give you a very actionable takeaway. Okay, in fact, smile perhaps is a nice takeaway. Okay, but we'll look at that. But there is a very certainly one clear takeaway, actionable takeaway, and many interesting abilities like smile. Okay, many interesting questions. I may not have all the answers. Okay, I don't claim to have all the answers. No, if someone claims to have all the answers, probably they are trying to cheat you. Okay, I don't have all the answers, but I have some many interesting questions and perspectives. That's what we are going to do further. Okay, so no surprises, no disappointments, and all that. That's what we are going to do, and there is a lot to do. Okay, so we are going to generalize this, and so this is what I meant by deconstructing physiological sigh. Look at in the sense physiological processes. Can you do the same thing by other means, or is the same thing happening in other things that we typically do or come across or we have known about? Okay, that is exactly what I meant by deconstructing physiological smile. In fact, in the common I'm very happy about, because at least one student, one of you certainly is like with me on this. We are on the same page. I teach biomedical engineering, right? You're all my students. I also have to teach you wear a very difficult hat, and I'm going to wear that hat the time being. Can you, okay, whether you have read the paper or not, I introduce the paper to you with whatever I said. What are some critical questions that you have about this paper? Hey, this is a reputed journal, reputed authorship team, and all that. This is peer reviewed. No questions and all that. I'm just trying to wear that hat to see. Okay, we need to understand real world is constrained. Okay, practical scenarios, there are pros and cons. We need to be able to see pluses and negatives, right? I can only turn left. You'll go hit a wall and fall down. Hopefully hit a wall and fall down. Okay, not go fall into a river, right? So there are many good things about the paper. Okay, we have discussed. We are already learning many good things, but let's also briefly, okay, humbly challenge what is being stated. Any of you want to do you see any serious problems with this paper? Again, if someone tells you scientific paper, I'm not referring to this scientific paper, any scientific work, there is no issue, like 100% perfect, right? Probably there is a big issue there. Okay, fortunately science has this self-correcting mechanism, right? Typically mistakes are made and then things are corrected, right? Self-correction is an interesting, important characteristics of science, and it's not the unique, it's not only unique to science. There are also a few other self-correcting mechanisms, like life, for example, right? Homeostasis is a self-correcting mechanism, right? So we need to look at, we don't want to think everything for face value. Any issues with this? Okay, let me quickly say a couple of things. Okay, there is a statistically significant difference. That doesn't mean the underlying mechanisms are also well known and all that, but often, right? Empirical evidence is confused for science. Typically, this goes when correlation doesn't mean causation, right? But empirical evidence also doesn't mean science. Science means few other things. So someone is talking about a paper, published paper like this, doesn't mean they are necessarily talking about science. Okay, one of the things is, so one of the comments that I'm getting is, hey, I think people who grew in emotionally distant or highly stressful environments tend to not really benefit from reducing anxiety as described in this article. Yeah, okay, of course they are being a steady population, right? Fine, will this work for extreme scenarios is a question. I don't think, in fact, even they claim that this will work for extreme scenarios. In a general population, will this work? That's a claim. But notice the underlying mechanisms are not clear. You think you are controlling breathing, but there are like 100 other things happening. brain is CNS, PNS, ANS, introception, right? Vagus nerve, phrenic nerve, diaphragm. So there are many other things happening. Things are confounded. So the mechanisms or why it is actually helping. Is it changing different activities in the brain that is having an effect, right? By breathing, right? Am I increasing, by deliberately breathing for 5 minutes, am I increasing the efficiency of respiration, right? Idea is that, but is that the actual reason? Or by exercising the nerves, I'm improving their tone, right? You exercise a muscle, it gets better, right? By exercising, say, the phrenic nerve or the vagus nerve, am I improving signal conduction in that muscle? Or, by deliberately trying to control breathing, am I restoring better sympathetic parasympathetic balance, right? There are some questions that is, in fact, very hard to clearly distinguish in any one single paper, okay? But fine, that is one thing. Just like correlation is often confused with causation, empirical evidence is, I'm not referring to this paper, but often empirical evidence is confused for science, okay? One thing, generalizability, of course, a statistical, what they did whatever they could do with it, statistical power, statistical significance, okay? There is a 95% chance there is a genuine difference. There is a 5% chance it's a statistical error, right? Statistical power, okay, but I suppose, again, I'm not questioning any of that. All of us do whatever is best possible, given the constraints, right? Time constraints, financial constraints, and all that. So actually 100 people is a decent number. They are able to make statistically significant conclusions at the end of the day. But okay, timeline, again, they are constrained by 30 months. Study population, okay, again, this is like, do they address extreme scenarios? They don't claim to address extreme scenarios. Okay, fine. There are confounding actions in physiology. Okay, but I'm going to pitch two major issues. The study population is not a normal study population. Reason, or let me correct that statement. The study population need not be expected to be a normal population. And let's say, according to what they have shown, 111 enrolled, okay, 3 lost to follow up. If the majority stick study, there is adherence, right? They did what they were asked to do. They had the discipline, interest, motivation to do what they were, first of all, to participate in the study. Once participating, they had that motivation to actually do what they were being told to do. One is to give practice as a practice problem. Another thing to actually do it, right? Only few students do it. Same thing. Okay, one claim is, hey, these are simple things that all the participants we asked, they all did it. This is a very simple thing. They could do it, right? But perhaps who pitched in, right? Participants had their motivation levels, their interest levels, their discipline levels need not be necessarily same as the general population. Adherence, in fact, is a major interesting point in this paper, but adherence doesn't necessarily, but could possibly mean bias. Okay, possibly a sensible thing to do. Okay, and then why use respiratory rate? Hey, there are few clinical situations where respiratory rate is lowered. Fine, we associated this to calming down. They try to study HRV and all that, RSA, HRV and all that, but except for some extreme pathologies, some extreme respiratory dysfunctions, change Stokes respiration, Komal's respiration and all that, Komal, Kosmal, respiration and all that. Respiratory rate is actually hardly, it's a vital, but it's hardly used in clinical diagnosis. It's certainly monitored, it's a vital, but it's hardly used for clinical diagnosis. But fine, forget clinical diagnosis, but using this as a proxy for physiological arousal. In other words, physiological stress. Can the body, can the sympathetic parasympathetic system, can the autonomic nervous system, can that only be stressed? Lung, can an organ of the body be stressed? Can the lung alone can be stressed? Can the heart be stressed? Right? Can respiratory rate capture that? So physiological stress, they use physiological arousal. I'm using physiological stress, but notice anything from from gene to a protein to a tissue to a organ to the entire body can be homeostatically stressed. Right? Genes can be stressed with electromagnetic radiation. Proteins can be stressed with temperature. Right? So using this as a proxy, this is a working means. This is, otherwise you are like sitting and there is no way you could write this paper, but parameter, a widely accepted parameter, they have done it. But is it a excellent proxy? That question remains. Of course, one of the suggestions is what would make a good proxy for physiological stress? I briefly put the difficult hat to challenge it. But we'll stop there. So no, one more thing. So just to relax a bit, a daily 5-minute breath work. The highlights, of course, anyone who reads the highlights and makes conclusion, should be called a fool. But notice, cyclic sighing is most effective at improving mood and reducing respiratory rate. Hopefully, there are constraints on the number of characters and words that can go into writing this points, a number of points in the highlights and character length of the highlights. Among the things considered, cyclic sighing is the most effective at improving mood and reducing respiratory. Among 4 things, this is the best, right? Cyclic sighing is not the most effective. Among the 4 things considered, cyclic sighing is the most effective. There are real life constraints, but trying to show you the difference between dichotomy between the actual results and the statements here, right? But of course, if you are making a conclusion based on the statement, it's it doesn't make sense, right? Fine. There was a sarcastic news article. It's a sarcastic article. British heat wave announcement at 26 degrees Celsius, right? Some of us who are in like 40, 45 and all that, our AC is at 26, right? 28 itself, like some of us are shivering, right? So heat wave announcement at 26 degrees, right? So it's sarcastic, I suppose this is. That's why I have quotes here. But notice, people are different all over the world. So what we learn from one part of the world, you cannot quickly generalize that to different part of the world. Even for the, forget extreme cases. Even for the general population, you have to take it with a pinch of salt. I will go do box breathing in Delhi air pollution. I will, of course, this is something that I will do physiological sighing while driving. While driving, I will do this, right? Inhalation, exhalation. I will control all this, right? Or in fact, things are known to be dangerous in water or near water, especially, so even for the general population, the context differs a lot. I'm not talking about extreme cases. Even for the general population. This is science, but we have to again take that with a grain of salt. Local environment, context, scenario, genetics, many of these are very different. these are problems with any study in healthcare, any study in physiological engineering. Okay, this examples I try to highlight that. So one of the commons is, what if the candidates were told the objective of the experiment they had in mind, what the results can be, so there was a positive response. Yeah, while trying to explain the participants, hey, you have to do this 5-minute daily practice. What you are trying to say is whether you are going to calm down. So this curious participant, right? Disciplined, curious participant. Hey, how do you know whether we are calming down? Hey, we are going to see if your respiratory rate goes down and all that. They are being given that information. Somehow like vaccination, right? Whether we know the mechanics of it or not, right? We take in, it works. Do you know exactly how the vaccine works? No. Okay, we have some vague idea. Okay, do you know exactly how all the vaccinations, all the varieties, right, how they work? No. You put it in, is there an effect? Yes, right. So they were told, we are trying to see if you calm down, that is say like respiratory rate lowers. They heard it, a part of their brain, right? Conscious, conscious, subconscious, unconscious, some part of that brain heard it. And then what if there is a outcome due to that? Possible scenario, this is a confounding element that I mentioned about it. Okay, and some of this mind body actions are also experiments are harder to design, to differentiate, and you need surgical, in fact, whether surgical precision would clarify this, dichotomize this two scenarios, right? You are told, given that information, that information had an effect, or you did this, doing that had an effect. It's very hard to distinguish that. Of course, there are also, just because it's hard doesn't mean that experiments are not being done, but it's things are confounded. I was trying to mention that. In fact, I should put that to the list here. Possible. Okay. How likely? How probable? Better experiments. Before I share the takeaways from the physiological sigh paper, I also want to share one more paper. Okay, I didn't ask you to read. I didn't want to overload it. I'm also not going to spend time on this. There is a paper published by Dr. Prabhakaran et al. In JACC, Journal of American College of Cardiology. Okay, I think one of the most reputed journals in cardiology. Okay, and yoga based. There's a central illustration. So yoga based cardiac rehabilitation versus enhanced standard care in acute myocardial infarction. So patients have heart attack, acute myocardial infarction. Suddenly their blood vessel to the heart, right, gets blocked, clots. There is this acute myocardial infarction. There is acute treatment. There is also follow-up intervention, supposed to be rehabilitation. So this is there in the guidelines. Someone has AMI, acute myocardial infarction. There is immediate treatment, and the treatment needs to be followed up with rehabilitation. It's also a common practice in, practice in the developed world, in the West, in US, Europe, and all that. This is there in the guidelines. Is also common practice, but this is literally non-existent in India. Why? To do cardiac rehabilitation, that the standard thing, you need costly equipment. Again, you need a team. You need a cardiologist. You need perhaps your team and nurses and all that. You need a space, room for that, right? So this is literally non-existent. But what they showed in this paper is they compared the effects of enhanced standard care, the standard thing they do, with, hey, this is very costly. Why don't you just try yoga, pranayama, meditation, simple poses, simple asanas, breathing exercises, pranayama, and then meditation. This is cumulative incidence rate, right? Number of complications that occurred after the acute myocardial infarction. Notice it is having at least same effect as the enhanced standard care. It is having an effect. In fact, it is almost the same as the enhanced standard care. After 2 years or something like that, it seems to be diverging, but this is I don't think there is sufficient power, statistical power, to actually make a claim whether one is better or the other, but it seems to have an effect. Yoga is actually having an effect comparable to that of standard cardiac rehabilitation. This paper had about 2000 participants, at least beginning of study, 2000 here, roughly 2000 here. Okay, engineer, I'm doing rough numbers, I'm not exactly reading the numbers, roughly 2000 here. Now compared to that 100 that we saw, 100, 101, 111 we saw initially, right? And certainly there is a change. In fact, in yoga care, the change seems to be better. Self-related scores, again, some of the inventories, self-rated health scores, it seems to be better. Okay. So, hey, this exercises, whatever we are talking about, has an effect. There is actually better empirical evidence in actually more problematic population, that is population who had AMI, heart attack, and it seems to match the effects of standard cardiac, costly cardiac rehabilitation. And this study was done in India. Scope for such a study in India. Okay. In fact, lots of studies being done and being published. Okay. Be aware of it. And quickly, like, why did they explain yoga therapy works? So the point of cardiac rehabilitation is three things. Okay. You want to reduce stress. Hey, what is stress? Physiological stress, right? Okay. So you want to reduce stress. Okay. This reduce stress. You want to improve the lifestyle. Many of the major disorders of our time are lifestyle disorders, or at least starting to be recognized as lifestyle. Simple changes in lifestyle is having drastic effects. Okay. Yoga practices, yoga culture by default suggests a healthy lifestyle. For example, avoid alcohol, at least avoid excessive alcohol. Hey, at least after acute myocardial infarction, you are taking so many drugs, blood thinners and all that, right? So at least there, avoid alcohol, right? Lifestyle changes like that. And then of course, you are doing some basic, simple, doable poses, moderate physical, improved physical activity. These three things is what is being targeted in standard cardiac rehabilitation. Yoga actually gives these three things, so it is having a comparable effect. This is this is how they explain their result. Okay, so we are talking about things known to have an effect. There is actually stronger empirical evidence, and even it works in very interesting class of population, even in uh, uh, patients recovering from heart attacks. Yoga seems to have actually similar effect as compared to that of enhanced standard care, or standard cardiac rehabilitation. That's very interesting. Okay, yoga has an effect. Reasons are also, in simple English, layman terms, they are also very clear. Now the question is, okay, as a student, can you put these information, knowledge, wisdom, right? Where is the knowledge? There is so much knowledge, but where is the wisdom, right? So can you put this to use to improve your lifestyle, to bring down the levels of stress, to improve your mood, and to improve your wellness? Question number one. And as biomedical engineers, biomedical engineering students, can you improve the status quo, at least even regarding knowledge or information, improve someone else's life? Now we have two interesting questions on that. In fact, so this is what this boils down to. So what can we do about this? Okay, did we discover physiological sigh? Yeah, what we think, so shall we become, right? What we achieve inwardly changes outer reality, right? This has been said again and again by different people in different cultures, right? வெள்ளத்தனைய மலர் நீட்டம் மாந்தர்த்தம் உள்ளத்தனையது உயர்வு, right? So this has been mentioned again and again. That is like the moment we start thinking about something, that starts to have a effect. Okay, whether there's a real effect, there is a physical effect and all that. There are, I don't think there are questions on whether it's a real effect, but there are lots of questions on whether it's a physical effect, non-physical effect, and I won't get into those details, but yeah, information is capable of changing status quo. So knowledge is powerful. Knowledge is power, right? If you know something, certainly gives you the power to change your course of action. Okay, that's, no one can question that. So notice physiological sigh was described by J.S. Haldane et al. Okay, he was actually trying to see studying differences between respiration. Hey, is it a chemical effect? Is it a nervous effect? Changes in respiration rate. Does chemicals control it? Does it nervous system control it? And he was trying to see the differences in respiration during sitting and while lying down, right? It turns out if you're lying down, your alveoli lungs like extra stressed, they start collapsing. In fact, if you're lying down in a supine position, if you're lying down in a prone position, actually that's a simple way to increase efficiency. Okay, but if you're in a supine position, your respiratory efficiency decreases due to various reasons. Okay, your efficiency decreases. So body has a natural tendency to do this double inhalation. In fact, the kind of double inhalation they are referring to is not this thing. Okay, that is the initial physiological sigh that we mentioned. That is not this one, right? The second inhalation is also actually very long. This is a kind of double inhalation that actually J.S. Haldane was studying, okay, was reporting. And in fact, all of us have observed this. It's a simple response of babies and children's when they are stressed, when they are crying, right? Notice their rhythm changes. They don't do, sometimes they do triple, quadruple respiration and all that, inhalation and all that. You could have observed that in babies, crying children, right? Double inhalations, sometimes even triple inhalations. And actually Haldane observed it because if you're lying down, you're not efficiently respiring. So there is an inbuilt mechanism, homeostatic mechanism, correction mechanism in place that puts this additional inhalation every now and then, not always double inhalation, every now and then it kind of automatically puts it in, so that your if the alveoli and all that is kind of extra collapsed, they trying to kind of like expand and all that. In cricket, like, okay, you are like off crease, right? Your footwork, you're getting to your normal batting position sort of that, or you're improving your footwork sort of that, resting state sort of that. Okay, that happens. This is how physiological sigh was initially noticed. Point being, actually there is a many interesting physiological details can be observed. Okay, we might take it for granted, but there is room to observe that and study that. Okay, but let me get here. This is what I showed you, right? So there is deliberate breath control, there is deliberate muscular control. Okay, it boils down to, okay, so few minutes of efficient respiration is having an effect, and then few minutes of deliberate control. The mind feels I am controlling that, I feel better, I don't have control over my life, at least I have control over my breath. Seems to recognize that, right? A possibility, right? There is a few minutes of deliberate control, breathing, muscle, mind, whatever it is, seems to have an effect. Okay, so one of the takeaways is, let's also deconstruct Surya Namaskar for those who don't know what Surya Namaskar is. Okay, series of poses that you do slowly, and interestingly, so you're doing, looks like you start with this pose 1, you bend down, okay, try to touch down, and then you get to this pose, okay, then get to this pose. I'm not going to use terms for this pose and all that. Then you do this 8-legged 8 or 7-legged pose, 8-leg pose, Ashtanga Namaskar, I suppose, right? and then you do the serpent pose, and then you do this, I think this is referred to as a dog pose, right? Mountain pose, dog. Okay, you do this pose, then you get back to this pose, one leg forward, then you get this here, bend down, and then you kind of like complete the cycle by bending down and coming back to the starting position. Sorry, so one, yeah, bend down, I missed this bend down. Okay, one, bend down, do this. There's a series of things you do. I don't know, most of you might know about this, but most of you may not know, may not be practicing this. But my point is, the breath is also controlled. While doing this, what looks like stretching poses, dynamic stretching poses. Okay, you inhale, exhale, inhale. Okay, exhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Right? Let me repeat that again. Hey, Surya Namaskar. So someone might be like, hey, that is not Surya. You do breathing differently. Okay, fine. The Surya Namaskaram that I know, what you do is inhale. In fact, inhale from while going here. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Exhale. Hold your breath or keep exhaling between 5 to 6. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. But interestingly, you change the rhythm. Okay, you do double exhalation at one point. Let's look at what is going on while you are doing this Surya Namaskaram. Is there deliberate breathing? Are you controlling your breath? Suppose, yeah, I mean, if you're doing the practice properly, you're supposed to control your breath. Okay, I am doing the stretches without controlling breath. That's a different story. But if you're doing this properly, you are actually supposed to deliberately control your breathing. Or you deliberately controlling your muscles? Not just my diaphragm, not just my intercostal muscles, but I am stretching and controlling of muscles in my body. Agonistic muscle, this muscle, that most of it I am actually deliberately controlling. So any of you have seen this Surya Namaskaram in this perspective? There is deliberate breathing happening while you do that. There is deliberate muscular control happening while you do that, or while someone does it. And from what we have seen so far, this is likely to have an effect, and typically this has a positive effect. This is one of the perspectives that I want to put in. Okay, that is, hey, there is this well-known thing, but have you seen it this way? You're doing some interesting things to your physiology. You're controlling your physiology. You are doing actually activating, very, very different things. In fact, let me go a step further. Okay. So in fact, there is this, this comes. I chose Surya Namaskaram for a very specific reason. You're not just controlling your breath or not controlling your muscles. You are actually deliberately stretching. You are also typically Surya Namaskaram by default. You are supposed to sun salutation. You are supposed to get sunlight. You are supposed to stand in front of sun and do it. You are also getting sunlight. Again, stretching and sunlight are known to have positive physiological effects. We'll try to cover that later. But while doing this, you are also doing this. All of that are known to have positive physiological effects. Sunlight exposure in the morning supposed to regularize your sleep quality, and all that, right? Sleep quality, quantity, and all that. Deliberate stretching. Hey, does blood supply somehow increase or improve? Efficiency of blood supply. One is oxygenation. Lung, the amount of oxygen the lungs is getting. There's improvement there, but the amount of oxygen the body is getting, the different parts are getting, is there a change there? Seems like stretching can also have effects there, but we need to, again, as I said, we need to look at that. We don't have time to look at that today, but this is a question to ask. Okay. So Kirtana is like, hey, more oxygen if done early in morning, ozone layer is more down. In fact, I think ozone layer, or there is less pollution. You meant to say that, right? Ozone layer, ozone actually at our altitude seems to be a problematic issue. Okay, less pollution early in the morning sunrises, yeah, seems to be a good. In fact, so Kirtana is almost like, I think, reading my mind, has already read my mind. Okay, so she is saying things that I got to say. Yeah. Okay. So one takeaway is, one of the things that you could do to improve your well-being, for general students, if you have some complications and all that, of course, it's not a thing. But generally, Surya Namaskaram seems a regular practice of that. At least is doing all the things that are seeming to give positive benefits regarding mood, wellness, stress, lowering stress and all that. Is there empirical evidence? Someone figured this out, right? The series of poses, this thing, right? A culture figured it out, right? How many people in that culture, right? Again, at this stage, just because something is not documented in a recognizable form doesn't mean there is no empirical evidence. Okay. But so many people have done it, seems to be doing well, right? So many normal people. So I suppose as a culture, we have empirical evidence. Okay. If I had to actually generalize this, notice, uh, walking, swimming, cycling, trekking, hill climbing, sightseeing, right? So all of these are known to have positive benefits, in moderation, okay, depending on your, your practice and where you are, in that, how much you are acclimatized to a particular exercise, right? Each are very different. For example, swimming and cycling. Cycling can be relatively, depending on the pose of your cycle, can be relatively less impactful on your joints. You are too old, right? Even cycling is impactful. Swimming, you are freely floating, right? You're going against gravity, right? So each of them have interesting differences, but there is sightseeing, right? You're trying to go to a place to look at a nice sunrise, right? By default, you're going to a place that has better, less pollution and all that. Okay. And then, Surya Namaskaram, there are, of course, in other cultures, I don't want to, overplay our culture. There are also, things like, Tibetan exercise. In China, they practice Tai Chi, right? Yogasanas, different stretching, and there is Hatha Yoga. Okay. Specifically, I want to highlight, there is pranayama. In fact, the study, that paper that we discussed highlights, hey, this is like well known. Can we start documenting, quantifying some of the effects, right? With empirical evidence. That's how they start with. And I want to highlight these two. Okay. In fact, pranayama, again, we need to address that differently. But right now, one thing that I would do to improve status quo, right? Unless say I have arthritis, right? I have joint inflammation, I will go do Surya Namaskar stretching. No. You have to be sensible. I have this weird rare medical condition, I will go to Surya. No, you have to be sensible. So I am talking to biomedical engineers and engineering students, okay, not necessarily general population. But this is something that you could do to improve your lifestyle, improve your wellness. Okay. We kind of saw the reasons behind it. I just try to put this in a different perspective. That's one thing. And notice, in fact, bee humming, right? Again, chanting, gargling, and all that are known to actually affect somehow, known to have effects on HRV, HRV, vagal tone. So, but notice, if you are like gargling, you are holding your breath. You cannot breathe while you are gargling, right? So, by gargling, you are also controlling your breath. So if gargling has an effect, you don't know whether that's a salt water, that hot salt water that is having an effect, or holding your breath that's having an effect, right? So things are confounded, but notice many of these things are known to have an effect. Okay. and there is a lot of work to be done. Now let me also, let's finish this. I have to really, shift gears, and I don't have time for warming down, but I have to shift gears. Okay, fine. Now what, right? Let's conclude this, but again with some interesting perspectives, right? We looked at few minutes of efficient respiration. Looks like efficient respiration is improving status quo. Few minutes of deliberate control, muscular mind, breath, and all that has an effect. Okay, so what are ways in which we can, do some few minutes of efficient physiology? Let's ask that question. Okay, I suggested this, but let's probe this question a little further. Okay. First question: what about effects of involuntary varied rhythm and breathing? This I don't do it deliberately. Involuntary, I'm doing it. That is, I'm changing my rhythm and breathing. Circumstantial, environmental reason. Is there a possibility of that affecting my mood and wellness? And can you quickly someone read my mind and give an example of involuntary variation in rhythm and breathing? In fact, this question, what about that information was the thing actually changed the thing, right? The vaccination, I don't know how the vaccination works, but it has an effect. So I didn't do it deliberately, but involuntary, I changed my rhythm and breathing. Will there be an effect? When I get excited and scared, yeah, this is of course the starting point of the parasympathetic sympathetic system. But no, as I said, what about laughter? Not this fake laughter, this deep laughter where you kind of like keep on exhaling and like you're not able to, of course, control that excitation. Like that breathing is like exhalation is like overextended. So how about you listen to stand-up comedy 5 minutes a day, laughable, deeply laughable stand-up comedy 5 minutes a day, kind of like, can it have an effect? Yeah, notice actually laughter is a drastic change in your breathing physiology. Laughter involves this excessive use of the diaphragm and all that intercostal muscle, like they go uncontrollably contract and all that, right? That is like very deep laughter. I'm not like this shallow laughter, right? In fact, laughter and all that is known to have an effect, right? So the question is, see, my point is, involuntary effects of varied rhythm and breathing can have an effect. It need not be deliberate. Involuntarily, even if it's happening, can have an effect. A minor thing, right? Laughter for the wrong reason can be cruelty. Eventually, it's not a good thing. But laughter for the right reason, okay, that certainly seems to improve status quo. So I'll add this caveat. Laughter for the wrong reason is actually cruel. Okay, but laughter actually has a potential to drastically improve things. Seems to have the potential to improve things from what we have been deconstructing so far. How about smiling? And it might appear absurd right now. How about crying? Right? Notice smiling is not a simple thing. Okay. Fortunately, I don't like my laughters are hardly very deep. Okay, but you may not come across a person who smiles as often as I do. Okay. So what I lack in laughter, I kind of make up for that in my smiles. So now, hey, this actor is playing a depressive role, man. Joker 2 is coming. How is that person still sane, right? Genuine concern, but yeah, of course, again, quick answer. Laughter for the wrong reason is cruelty. Again, crying can be for the right reason or wrong reason. Crying is not, you don't have, physiological sighing. I told you, right? Babies do that, right? Multiple inhalations, right? So they have this inbuilt mechanisms. Crying, you have seen, the great people crying for the right reasons, right? Federer, after winning his last Wimbledon, he was in tears, right? Dhoni, after winning his the World Cup, he was in tears, right? You have seen Virat Kohli crying. He never thought, that he had that, he had that physiology of tear glands. I thought it was not there, but we have seen him cry, right? So laughter can be for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. Crying can be for the right or wrong reasons. But notice they have the actually potential to deeply uh, deeply affect you. Of course, by mood, wellness, we are talking about happiness, laughter, smiles, and all that. And typically, doing it for the right reason. If you are empathizing, okay, typically you are fine. Okay, if you are compassionate, you are on the safe side. It doesn't really, complete if I don't discuss these things. What if scenarios, right? And turn left, we should be able to turn right. Okay, I'm all going to ask you, pose you, make you think few other interesting questions. How about few minutes of deprived oxygen quality do? Does the scenario occur deliberately or involuntary, like chance by chance, automatically? You think few minutes of deprived oxygen quality, can that have an effect? Can you in fact think of yes or no is best answered empirically, right? You do an scientific experiment and then answer that. But can you think of scenarios where there is about regular few minutes of deprived oxygen quality? Necrosis, okay, tissue death, but just few minutes deprived oxygen quality, deprived efficiency in respiration somehow. Unfortunately, our lifestyle, our the times we are living in, actually is putting us in the situation. Okay, I'll point out some scenarios, but again, the reason I'm having this, you had a very strong takeaway, okay, Surya Namaskar, right? But what are the projects or what are some things, questions and answers that I can address and answer as a biomedical engineer? That's where I am right now. I just want to probe your mind, expand your mind a little, further and give you, some perspectives, right? Yes, this is actually happening. Pollution, air pollution is one thing. Okay, I am going to quickly pose a couple of very hard questions that you could actually, as a student or as an engineer, you could consider answering. Okay, what are some dormant latent mechanisms that activate poor oxygenation? That is, it is dormant, it is latent, it's like normally it seems to be not there, but during some abnormal situations, happens 5 minutes a day, all of a sudden they show up. Air pollution actually is a good example. Half an hour I have to go back and forth from work to home to work, not in a AC car, okay, but in a two-wheeler or in a bus, right? In a polluted city, right? Populated, polluted city. We are actually doing this, right? But I'm going to give you a better example here. Okay, pollution actually is a nice example, but more physiology relevant example. Okay, it turns out increase in heart rate often exposes latent mitral regurgitation. Mitral regurgitation is one of the worst efficient things one could do about respiration. Heart is doing all the work to pump the blood. It's like corruption. Heart thinks the blood is being pumped. Everything, brain thinks the blood is being pumped. If you look at it in echo, unless you look for mitral regurgitation, you think the blood is being pumped. Ejection fraction, so and so, right? But some of it, a lot of it, considerable amount is getting pumped back to where it came from, not to where it's supposed to go. That is, it's supposed to go to the aorta, but it's going back to the atrium. left atrium, right? Left ventricle, it's supposed to go through aorta, but from left ventricle, it's going back to, part of it is going back to the left atrium. Think about cardiac output, your cardiac output calculation. Okay, heart stroke volume is this much, heart volume changes this much, heart pump this much amount of blood, but most of that ended up at the wrong place. That is mitral regurgitation. Interestingly, there is lateral mitral regurgitation that will only show up at higher heart rates. But the question is, this is normally not seen. At normal resting heart rates, it's not there. All of a sudden, the person is stressed. There is mitral regurgitation. And of course, we live in a situation where we seem to be stressed more often than not, right? The question, I mean, in fact, the real question is, how would you track or test the effects of HR and later MR? We already saw, okay, we started off with a very, very decent paper. You could do things like that, but now I'm trying to push you further. If there is a latent mechanism that is actually resulting in poor oxygenation, at least for 5 minutes a day, how would you track that? How would you test that? Can you design an experiment, at least in paper, to test? Hopefully your design is good that someone gives you the resources to go ahead and do that experiment. Resources, consensus, permission to do that experiment. In fact, I tried to make the question easier by giving you a very real life example. Increase in heart rate and manifestation of latent mitral regurgitation. Okay, I gave you this example. What if that actual scenario that affects all of us is not known? What if the dormant latent mechanism is not known? How would you find it? Right? Very interesting question as a biomedical engineer. We live in the world of wearables and all that. We live in the world of data science, AI and all that. But questions like this are hard. Inadequate sleep. There is apnea, right? While sleeping, you forget, you forget to breathe. Or there is obstruction in the trachea and all that. Inadequate sleep also lead to increase in cortisol, leading to cardiovascular problems. Yeah. So in fact, that's a different story that you have to come. What happens if you don't sleep properly? But notice, there are breathing issues associated with sleeping, snoring, and all that, apnea and all that, right? These are very real world, real life impending problems that need to be addressed and solved. Okay, I wanted to bring that to your notice. So in fact, what if the primary dormant mechanism is not known? So actually, HR and later MR, I mentioned, Kirtana mentioned, okay, sleep apnea. You are very close, okay, sleep apnea. But what if that mechanism is not known? How do you identify that, right? Can we ensure this is a primary mechanism? Sleep apnea is a primary mechanism. How do you answer that? Among the two things we did, this is the worst. But what is the actual worst? We don't know that, right? How do you find that? How do you design an experiment to find it, right? When you start answering, addressing these questions, already we are talking about things at the boundary of knowledge, right? We started off with a very good paper. The moment you are addressing and answering this, you are doing some cutting edge research work cutting edge research work, okay? In fact, the real question is, so how would you effectively identify primary dormant latent mechanisms? Analyze all aspects of the study. See, again, we are practically constrained. The money grant we get is constrained, right? The time we have for the study is constrained. The participant patience is constrained. Sir, 8:30. Now I don't know how many of you left, but even this meeting itself, we have like your patience is being tested, right? Hopefully it's sufficiently interesting enough so that many of you are staying, right? Some of you are staying, at least one of you are staying, right? But you have to get consensus, you have to convince the participant, they have to have the patience to go through the study and all. There are practical difficulties. How do you make them, how do you design effective, efficient experiments so that you can show, hey, there is a significant difference happening here? Hundreds and thousands of parameters and devices, right? Okay, this is a very hard question, but if you are answering this, of course, you are already, you are a for excelling in biomedical engineering. Okay, fine. That's one definition for excellence. And then, yeah, before concluding, I will also ask this thing. So far you've been asking, hey, what is most effective thing that we could do to improve our mood? Okay, it doesn't end if we don't discuss what are the most negative, what is the most negative things to do regularly. We don't want to do it regularly. Of course, the point of recognizing or knowing that is to avoid it, right? What are, in fact, let's make this question simpler. What are some of the most negative things you could do regularly? Quickly, 5 seconds, can we have some answers so that I can wrap up this meeting? We are almost close to the end. Okay. What are some of the negative things one could do regularly? Negative things, things one could do to affect your wellness mood negatively, deliberately or involuntarily. But it's a negative thing that we do. Air pollution. Okay, someone mentioned we have to drive, sir. No other way. When sitting in this bus, sir, just so you drive a car in the heavy traffic, sir, then you will know how your BP goes up, right? Then this student is showing. So that's why I don't drive. I sit leisurely for the 2-hour bus travel back and forth from college, right? My hands are like stationary. I cannot move it. I don't feel like moving it, right? So you, someone help me here. Inhaling drugs, instant gratification. Yeah, again, yeah, there are you're all grown-ups, adults, right? You know many negative things, right? So what are some of the negative things one could do regularly? How about 5 minutes of regular anger? I have very simple things. Okay, drugs and all that antidote. We need we need to know how to reverse the effects and all that. Opioid will go affect your medulla oblongata, pons and all that, will stop your breathing rate and all that, control breathing centers, right? So drug and all that, let's put that, okay, fine. You could actually smoking, alcohol, right? You could damage yourself. But how about 5 minutes of regular anger, regular fear, driving in traffic, polluted air every day? Unfortunately, notice our lifestyle. Watching reels, I don't know. I don't want to comment it right now. Okay. Perhaps you watched a reel where they gave you some interesting information. You learned it. That information changed you. So I don't know about watching reels, but yeah, it seems to be a distraction to your brain and affects you, right? But these are some of the things that one could try avoiding, right? Or at least these are things that are there. One needs to consider. Yeah, I don't want again to get too philosophical. How about 5 minutes of regular greed? That 5 minutes I will be like greedy. Presuming greed is a negative thing, right? Not presuming, perhaps greed is a negative thing, right? So how do you test? How do you design experiments? How do you gather data? How do you analyze the results and say, hey, this is really bad, don't do it, right? Stop doing that. Hey, this is all happening all around, and we need at least empirical justification as to say this is bad, right? At least, the moment you package it that way, at least it convinces a lot of people in these days, right? Science inclined marketing, right? But how do you gather information on that, or how do you design good experiments on that? Okay, these are all very interesting questions. In a way, this is what makes biomedical engineering interesting. Okay, so okay, I think I am towards the end of this. Okay, yeah, started. There is healthcare there is cure, and then there is prevention, right? But I think the statement summarizes this better. There is a physician in the outside, and then there is a physician in the inside. Doctors don't heal patients. They give them drugs. They support the patients heal. Right? They create a nurturing environment where the body can heal itself. Orthopedic surgeon, bone fracture, they will agree with it. He'll at least hold it in place, the bone heals itself. We'll at least, give the culture, nurturing environment and all that. The point is, this physician inside ourselves, be it genetic memory, physiology, homeostasis, you call it prana, whatever it is, there is a physician inside, right? Not much is understood about this physician. A lot has been known about this, but cutting edge science, right, is actually starting to answer questions here about the physician inside of us. The body is healing parts of it, healing itself. The body knows medicine, right? I mean, physiology, right? There is a physician inside, right? In fact, I suppose this is by a 100 and last I knew this doctors. This is not my quote. It's a quote by a doctor who is 103 years old. And if I remember correct, her name is Gladys McGray. Okay, but the point to think about is not much is. There is a lot to be explored or known and discovered about the physician inside. Okay, there is a lot of scope for biomedical engineers. In fact, the way I discussed that should summarize this. And finally, I should say, why am I doing this, right? Or why should you be doing this? What is a laughter for the right reason and all that? I think, sir, and then we'll. Does anyone know this is? I think Dr. V. Goindappa Venktaswamy. He started Aravind Eye Hospitals, right? They did some very phenomenal work regarding preventable blindness. He has actually someone who has positively impacted healthcare in our country. Intraocular lens, yeah, right, in India, yeah. See, it is ourselves we are helping. It is ourselves we are healing. Okay. If you are here, laughter for the wrong reasons. When can, laughter for the wrong reasons can be cruel, right? When can that be really cruel, or when can it be for the wrong reasons? If you don't have compassion, probably you're doing it for the wrong reasons. What is compassion? I think you can go Google, check a dictionary or Google or something like that, right? So it's ourselves we are helping, okay, and it's ourselves we are healing, and intelligence capability. You are here, you are there. My position is this. I have so much money. These are all secondary, right? In fact, what has driven me is this. Of course, I need to have some compassion, but of course there is also this joy, or joy of doing something beautiful that needs to be there. Okay, this is what you are really supposed to be looking for while you are searching for a job or a career. While you are trying to envision a career, this is what you should really be looking for. That takes you, preferably good direction. Okay, with that, okay, let's stop here. Are there any questions? 1 or 2 minutes, I'll take any questions and I'll put it. So where does this go? We have touched the tip of an iceberg. I told you not much is known about the physician inside, right? We have touched the tip of an iceberg. One paper we did and we deconstructed it. We kind of generalized it and try to look at things in a new perspective. Some strong takeaways for the near and distant future, right? But so one breath at a time. How about steps? So how, what happens during walking, right? What happens during asanas, posing? What happens during stretching, right? What happens during intermittent fasting? What happens during sleep? What is good quality sleep, right? Good quality regular sleep, right? We have like one life at a, what happens during lifetime, this life cycle. You have like multiple breaths, but there is like multiple sleeps, but there is like this not multiple lives, like this one life, right? To make it efficient, right? So this can be seen in multiple time scales, and we'll continue this. If I don't know how many of you are staying back. If you found this useful, yeah, at least one student, a couple of you are staying back, right? We'll continue with this discussion, right? We look at one aspect at a time, and in fact, yeah, let me finish here. Unless there are any questions, we'll finish. And I know where, I think some of the things that I was trying to say is best articulated in this poem. Okay. I don't have time to read the poem, but where the mind is without fear, into that heaven of freedom, right? The mind without freedom mind without, mind without fear is a heaven of freedom. Okay, there are few other things, but mind without fear, into that heaven of freedom, my father, let my country awake, right? These are some of the things that drive me. Hopefully, made sure that, my physiology is still holding very good. Homeostasis is still doing good.